fashion, things to wear, possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. All right, Fangs and Infernos, let's get our giddy up on there. Devil, what do you say, man? We do a little bit of hee-hawing today, man. Let's talk a little bit about rednecks, my friend.
Oh yeah, it's time to find your sister, who's your mother, who's also your cousin, and cornhole her, and hopefully you don't hear the banjos playing in the background. But
In my movie, you will.
You might, yeah, and you might hear a lot of different things in these movies, but yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about redneck horror, and we're gonna go somewhat fully redneck in one movie, and partially kind of rednecky in another one. But the good thing about it is that both of these movies star both of the people in the movies. Which is kind of interesting. We're gonna talk about 2000 and Maniacs with the good old Robert Englund in it, aka Freddy Krueger, but with a small cameo of Kane Hodder in it.
I know. So welcome to Freddy vs. Jason.
Yeah, and then we're gonna go talk about Hatchet, which is Kane Hodder, who has a little bit of a cameo with Robert Englund in it. So a little bit of love from Freddy versus Jason going on. Not the Freddy versus Jason the movie, because if you mention that to Kane Hodder from anybody that's ever seen Holliston, you might tick off Kane Hodder and he might go psycho and try to kill you.
Absolutely. No, for sure. This one's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I remember back when you pitched, and because we even moved our planned episode that was going to be redneck horror. But I remember when you pitched the idea to me back when you did, I was like 2001 Maniacs. That's what I want. That's what I want to talk about. I love this movie. I love it to death. It's literally just so great. And don't get me wrong, Fangs and Infernos, this is not oh my God, we've already figured out the numbers. No. This is not a 9 or 10 thing. I just genuinely do love this movie. If not for the fact that I already knew that we had a redneck horror episode planned at some point, is absolutely a reason why this was not chosen for a better remake. And I like the original 2000 Maniacs, 2001 Maniacs. Like, it's a really cool movie. I thought it was well written. It's well shot. I like the execution. Obviously, the original one is an old movie. So like comparing that type of old movie to modern day horror, it's not uncommon for a modern day horror to be what traditionally would be considered a better remake. But like this movie, I really think it's cool. I think it was so well done on a lot of different levels because you've got Robert Englund as the main villain. You've got Lynn Shay, who plays his wife, and Lynn Shay is just fantastic in everything as far as I'm concerned. In fact, and she's even has a ties into another actor from their time in Detroit Rock City who actually has very, very much left the grid. And Giuseppe Andrews is in this movie, who when Devil and I had a conversation with Trip, we had actually even asked him like what the deal was with Giuseppe, because we know that Sam Huntington, who played Jam in Detroit Rock City, is still around and does cons periodically because I have like a Detroit Rock City like 8x10 that I've been getting that I'm halfway done with the boys. So I just kind of asked him casually. I was like, "Well, I know Sam's out and about. What's the deal with Giuseppe?" And even and and James was straight up like, shout out to V&D alumni James DeBello. He was straight up like he is just nowhere to be found. Like he's all right as far as we know, but he is off the grid. He really can't be found. He is just a guy in the ether now. So, but yeah, so it's cool that Giuseppe's in this movie because I also love his character, especially when it comes to the end because I think it's just so fucking bitchin'. But anyway, that being said, 2001 Maniacs. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's fun, it's flirty, it's very straightforward. Like, the thing I also really like about this movie is this is a well done movie, in my opinion, but a movie that doesn't do any necessary twists and turns that don't need to be done. It's literally a very straightforward horror slasher 2000s, even late 90s style premise. You know, kids traveling, to go do whatever. College kids traveling to do what the fuck ever. Um, get bad directions, get a flat tire, are trapped in this like, you know, hillbilly hick town and are kind of invited in the festivities while not fully realizing, at least not right away, that they're basically the entertainment. They're the main course. They're the this, they're the that. And there's also secondary characters, of course, like the motorcycle couple. As people are just kind of getting picked off one by one and then trying to survive. But I've always been very fond of this movie because I love the fact that it doesn't take unnecessary risks and it doesn't try to be anything other than exactly what it is. So while there's a part of me that feels very 9 and 10 mentally about this movie, but also that being said, I'm not going to lie to you guys when it comes to Devil's Pick, I hold Hatchet as a 9-10 in my brain as well. It's an awesome movie and a killer franchise. I just really like the design of 2001 Maniacs. I just again, it puts it right out there for you. It's got a lot of predictability to it, sure, but it's just as funny as this sounds for redneck horror, it's just classy.
Yeah, I mean it's good. Like I said, and it does like the, what you would kind of expect with it being redneck horror, and kind of rednecky, where it's some dark humor, even some racial humor, but it's not overly over the top kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's definitely,
Yeah.
like he goes, oh, like who wants dark meat, later on, or
It makes
to
sense for Confederate times.
yeah, or like the China woman and things like that, where it definitely could have been a lot worse, as far as like
Yeah.
the language and stuff like that could have been more of, more like, the Quentin Tarantino's movie where there's a lot of just, words that we obviously aren't gonna say on here and stuff like that. But like I said, it definitely still has a little bit of that tongue in cheek kind of humor where it's like, even like earlier, like I think the biggest more risque other than like calling the girl China woman is like, where do the blacks hang out around here? And the one guy's like, the tree over there. That's probably like the closest to being like sort of like, ooh, that's a little bit borderline, But then again, like I
Yeah.
said, these guys are, when you find out that these guys are, from the old Confederate times and stuff like that, it's definitely a lot less than what would have been said if it legitimately was in that time, time period and stuff like that. But I mean, the one thing about this movie that I always love and gets stuck in my head every time I see it, I will sing this song for like 9 million years. Is the South will rise again? I just love the freaking. I just love the cheeky tongue and kind of stuff. That's just the jokes and stuff like that, where they're like, what are you doing? Oh, it's gonna be on you. You know what I mean? Oh, do you like horses? Oh yeah, and then he's got her tied up to basically getting, drawn and quartered, and, and things like that, where it's just like, like, ooh, the one thing I hate about Chinese food is when I eat it, 30 minutes later, I'm hungry again. You know what I mean? Just like the little dumb jokes like that throughout the whole entire movie. But, I mean, you got the one idiot redneck kid that's like trying to have sex with a sheep the whole entire time. You got
Yes.
the two girls that are like cousins that are making out the whole entire time. It's basically,
Yeah, but
it's got
they give that iron jawed blowjob, dude.
yeah, yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, that's the cool thing about it. This movie does everything that you need. It's got that humor, it's got the blood, it's got the gore, it's got nudity and sexual things throughout the whole entire time. So you're definitely gonna get your skin and sin and skin and stuff like that throughout it. But you know what I mean. But it also like it's got some crazy shit. She kills the one dude with like the fucking moonshine that's acid. She's making him freaking like suck down in a tube and
Yeah.
just weird shit like that the whole entire time. I love the fact that it's just like, yeah, you got Lynn Shay's and like I said, Lynn Shay and Robert Englund's characters are just like perfect. It's just one of those movies that when you watch it, it's I've seen this movie like 9 million times. I'll probably watch it 9 million times again. It's just great, you know what I mean, when it comes to it. Like I said, it's very, like you said, it's a very simple premise, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
said, bunch of kids just going in, getting stuck in a town, every kind of thing, trapped and going to this town, and then you find out later on that the town really isn't really a town and it's a graveyard or whatever, and these people, but I like that. But yeah, I mean, it's it's simple, but it's effective. It just works really well. Like I said, I think it's just it's acted very good. I love everybody in the movie. I just think the like I said, the cheeky tongue in cheek kind of like potty humor and stuff like that's really funny. And like I said, it's like, even when Giuseppe comes in, like, I love his entrance. He comes in, he's wearing like, the full on, like, kind of suit kind of, so, like, ooh, he looks really good. And he's like, oh, wait till he gets here, man. The ladies aren't going to be able to resist his charm and stuff like that. Where it's just like, he just has that kind of like swagger to him. Like, he's like
Yeah.
the rock star of like of this like this town of of people and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just it's typical. You got the one dude like, yo, who we gonna get the cornhole, the gay guy or whatever like that. And one guy's like, I'll do it. He's like, you're not supposed to be happy about doing this, like, you know what I mean? Like, we got to do it, but you're not supposed to want to do it.
Right. And one of the things I love about this movie, like for real, as far as like a bloodlust style, is like, dude, like the kills in this movie are actually pretty top notch, Devil. I mean, they are some seriously quality kills. I mean, you got the one, person, that girl that she's pulled together like with, every limb tied to a horse and pulled in
Yeah,
like
drawn
every
and
different.
quartered.
What's up?
It's called drawn and quartered.
Drawn and quartered. Yeah, you've got the drawn and quartered girl. You've got the guy who was tricked into drinking acid thinking it was moonshine. And then of course, you've also got, the end kill, which we'll get to when it comes to right about that time anyway. But like there's just
The spear. I like the guy with the spear through his mouth and stuff
the
like
guy
that,
with
through
the
his ass, through
spear
his mouth.
through, again, the fucking blowjob from hell.
The bell that crushes the China woman.
Yes, I mean, there's so much. Fuck it, we're going all the way through this. And the fact that the final girl and guy think that they're the final girl and guy to be escaping on the motorcycle with not a care in the world, knowing that they're finally past all this, to get completely decapitated by razor wire, like by barbed wire that was set up by Giuseppe at the very end of the movie, giving us one of the rare movies where the villains come out on top as Giuseppe fades off into obscurity, because again, that was something that was already, that you had already addressed, but is also addressed well, not that long before that scene, is the fact that this town doesn't really exist. It did, but it's a graveyard. These are, bloodthirsty, Confederate ghosts and spirits that come back around this time of the year all the time to take on new victims and celebrate, Confederate Day or whatever it is, and then take people out, one by one. But I've always really appreciated the kills that they did in this movie, because not only did they do they make sense to the time period, they're just very, very well done. And again, Eli Roth is in this movie too.
Yeah, I mean that's one of my favorite parts. It's like he's basically reenacts his role from Cabin Fever, throwing the freaking dead, possum into the freaking road and stuff like, "Oh, you killed my pet possum. Give me a ride." You know what I mean? He's even got his dog with him that that he had in Cabin Fever. I just love the fact that, yeah, it's like such a random cameo, you know what I mean? But I always loved it and stuff like that. Yeah, and it's like, it's one of those ones, like I said, it's one of those movies that's great. And, I love watching it. When, something that we've talked about all the time is like, would you like a sequel? Would you not like a sequel? Then you go into the second 2001 Maniacs, and it's like,
We love you. We
yeah.
love you, Bill Mosley. Just for the record.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, granted, yes, there are some cool stuff. There was, some cool characters in it, but yeah, it didn't have, it tried to do the same thing again, and it just didn't work. It's one of those ones where it's like, lightning strikes once, that doesn't
Yeah.
strike twice and stuff like that. Granted, yeah, like I said, yeah, we do love Bill Mosley, so, but yeah, as far as like the sequel wise, yeah, it's not too great. It's mildly entertaining at best, but it's definitely a step down from 2001, this one and stuff like that. So yeah, it's fun. Like I said, I love the whole thing and stuff like that. I love the fact that it's just like nonstop craziness and stuff like that. It's love like I said, the skin and sin throughout the whole entire thing. I love the fact that like, you know, everybody's even the one character is like everybody's getting nookie except for me kind of guy and stuff like that, but it's like, yeah, you know what I mean, it's like, okay, something's going wrong in this town, you know what I mean, it's like even the guy said like, who's gonna allow you to just come to this town and give you everything for free and feed you,
Yeah.
and what kind of, like, do you even see like a telephone or a TV or anything that's modern? It's like, this is kind of weird, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean that's it, then you find, like you said, you find out that that these are crazy ghouls, or ghosts are that's the one thing about this movie. You don't really quite know really what they are. They're all kind of dead because it
Yeah.
obviously talks about this graveyard. These people this town was massacred and killed and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But you got the one that might be, he takes off Robert England's eye and he's got maggots and stuff like that. So he's kind of like a ghost. But then the one, one's kind of a ghoul because she's got these razor white teeth. Then you got the other one that's kind of like a vampire all of a sudden because she's like, "Are you going to let me in?" And he was like, "Okay." And then all of a sudden he turns around. She's already in the room and stuff like that. So it's like, are they vampires too? Or are they
Oh,
this? You really don't know exactly what all these people are. They're obviously, that they're no good. They're cannibals. They love to eat
yeah.
people and stuff like that. So that's the one thing about them. They're definitely cannibals. But yeah, you never really, like I said, it's that typical kind of ghost story, per se, but then they're really not ghosts. They're all kinds of different weird things and different
Yeah.
beings and different shit. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those ones where like you really don't care too much about that. They could be whatever they want to be. It's just, like I said, it's just a good fun time. I love, like I said, the South will Rise Again song. I love that they're just jamming to their banjo and playing songs and just like talking about killing everybody.
Absolutely, brother, for sure, man. When it comes to this movie, when it comes to the obituaries of this movie, I'll be honest, like I stand pretty solidly behind it, because the thing I always appreciated about this movie was that it was again, it wasn't in illusions of grandeur, and I know we've used that term plenty of times and we'll continue to use it some more, but I really think it's particularly accurate to this movie, where like when you do get those movies that are like really trying to set a certain standard or trying to have shock value or trying to have that twist, there's plenty of movies that know how to do it and execute it flawlessly, and then other movies that I can appreciate tried and fell a little bit flat. I loved the fact that there was nothing really particular about this movie that made you think that they were trying to be anything other than a redneck ghost story. And that's actually something that I really, really appreciate about this movie. When it comes to myself, I like this movie at an 8. In reality, I do find it to be a solid, though, 7.5 if I'm taking the common populace of horror fans into this equation. But I do feel like it deserves an 8 in the discussion, regardless of sequels, regardless of prequels. You know what I mean by that, Fangs. You guys know what I mean. But as itself, I do feel like it's easily a strong 7.5, but I like the consideration for 8. What do you think, my friend?
I mean, I'm definitely in that range where it's a 7.5 to an 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially just because it's a interesting story. It's a take on a ghost story. I love the fact that it's like that. I mean, the cast alone is like, like I said, with Robert Englund and Lynn Shay and Giuseppe and all them in it. You have those little quirky moments, like you said, them throwing in Eli Roth, and even at the very end, you got Kane Hodder in it for a second, he's the strong guy that's holding him in the fight at the end where he was doing like that. So you got a little bit of that, into it. And like I said, it's got the sin and skin and stuff like that in it. So, if you're into seeing boobies and things like that, you're gonna get a decent amount of that. And like I said, it's just, bloodlust and gore. It's got that. I mean, it's got, like I said, it's got a little bit of everything for everyone as far as if you're into the horror stuff. Yeah, it's got a little bit of that comedy. Yeah, it's got some points and parts in it that are kind of, you know, kind of, you're like, okay, yeah, blah blah blah. But in general, it's a fun movie. I think it's just one that, like, it's entertaining. It's enough. It's a movie where, if you're into that kind of stuff, you can watch over and over again. It might not be something you watch, every other month, but it's a movie that you can watch once a year or twice a year and just have a good time with it. So, yeah, I'm in
Totally.
that. I mean, I'm in that 7.5 to 8 range. I think is pretty good for that. You know what I mean? Like I said, I mean, I think doing obviously with some other of the genre. I mean, depending on how you're doing it, because it's like, we're putting it on redneck horror, but which is definitely is, but it's definitely got a little bit of that comedy kind of, or ghost kind of story to it too. You can add to it.
Sure.
So, you know what I mean? Like I said, I mean, when you think of redneck horror, the pillars of redneck horror is, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, maybe, The Hills Have Eyes and things
Yeah.
like that, Wrong Turn or stuff like that, because those are the ones where you think, even to a point where I know it's not technically a horror movie, but I think probably one of the most horrific movies of redneck kind of horror-ish would be like movie like Deliverance, where it's
Yeah.
not really a horror, but that's the epitome of redneck, like, oh shit, bad shit's gonna happen. Even though people do get killed in it, I don't think Deliverance was ever really considered a horror film. You
Not
know what I
really.
mean? It's I mean, you can kind of throw it in there because people obviously do get killed in the movie. It's more
I've
of like
always
a
thought of it as a psychological thriller.
yeah, definitely more of a thriller of it to it. But yeah, like I said, those are the ones where those are the high grades of this genre. Where I think this one is still in that ballpark. I mean, there's definitely a lot of worse, especially when it comes to redneck horror. There are definitely a lot of movies that do it and don't do it well. Like I said, we've talked about it before. There's movies that are really, really good, like you have The Hills Have Eyes or stuff like that, or even some of those Wrong Turns. Wrong Turn is good. Hills Have Eyes is good. Their sequels typically sometimes not as good. So it's like, just because you have that redneck horror. I mean, to me, I mean, as far as like, with something like this, I think the only other one that we haven't mentioned that would be in that realm of redneck horror, but with the comedy would be the Tucker and Dale, which is probably
Yeah,
one of the ones where like, yeah, that one is gonna be a nine, not 9 to 10 level as far as like redneck horror mixed in with that comedy, like we've talked about before with like, horror comedy and things like
it's
that. They have
really
those
funny.
ones that one's probably like as far as like I wouldn't go say newer, but within the last like 20 years kind of film is like that breakout of it. Like I said, old school is definitely more of like your Texas Chainsaw Massacres. That's because they're rednecks, you know what I mean? They're in the middle of freaking nowhere, kind of shit to that the hills have eyes kind of stuff. But so for me, I don't know. I mean, I think that 7.5 to 8 is a pretty good realm. I mean, I guess we'll figure out and tweak that when it comes to, after we talk about, Adam Green's Hatchet.
Absolutely, for sure. And we love some V&D alumni Adam Green. So let's put that right out there to remind you, our beloved Fangs and Infernos and RIPs, that our beloved Devil and myself have interviewed Adam Green. And Mrs. Vamp still definitely doesn't make me forget about that, because back before Devil and I really, made sure to be completely professional when it came to our interview execution. We took advantage of our human tripods, and poor Mrs. Vamp was super not stoked at what truly was planned out to be like a 10 to 15-minute interview with Adam Green that pushed like 30 to 40 minutes. Shout out to Mrs. Vamp for fucking staying strong and holding our camera when it came to that. But anyway, that being said, Fangs and Infernos, Devil and I love us some Adam Green. We're just a big fan of what he does. He's also a genuinely awesome human being. He's got a great, well, they're kind of on hiatus due to the death of a bandmate, but he had a musical project called Haddonfield, which is great. I've got their vinyl and their CD, but we know him from movies. We've got Hatchet, the whole Hatchet series. We've got Frozen. We've got, Digging Up the Marrow, and Devil and I are very fond of Holliston. So we do love us some Adam Green. Now, that being said, Hatchet is a great one. Like, I love this franchise. I love this whole series. It's a really refreshing take on traditional slasher style. Its cast is pretty sick, if nothing more. The fact that you've got within the top five horror icons, you've got three of them. You've literally got Kane Hodder. You've literally got Jason, Freddy, and Candyman all in the same movie. And that's only the big name people, because the cast itself is pretty damn stacked. Because even the main hero in Joel has an amazing pedigree from Dodgeball to, Grandma's Boy. And you and I met him not that long ago, and he was absolutely great. When you, me, and Mrs. Vamp went to one of our cons, he was super awesome. Was Mrs. Devil there for that one? I forget offhand.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
she didn't go.
gotcha. So was you, me, and Mrs. Vamp for that one. But yeah, it was a great time. So anyway, back on point. Hatchet is great. It's a insanely refreshing take on traditional slasher, which Adam does very, very well. I love the fact too that a villain, and you and I were there at New Jersey Horror Con for the Icon Award for that particular event, that was, or Lifetime Achievement. I forget offhand how Ryan does it, but anyway, basically kind of like the Lifetime Achievement Icon Award was given to Kane Hodder at the first VIP that you and I did. In fact, I think it was the first VIP that they ever did. And the statues are made by hand by a specific artist, and it was actually the New Jersey HorrorCon logo, but it's made to look like one of their iconic characters. And I'll never forget this because I thought this was geniusly done. Is that this the statue was made to look like Victor Crowley from Hatchet, where people in reality, yes, so many people know Kane Hodder as Jason, as for a lot of us, myself included, the Jason. But the one thing I thought was fucking genius was doing it as Victor Crowley because nobody else has ever and likely will ever be Victor Crowley. It belongs to Kane, which I thought was very, very cool. But anyway, I mean, Hatchet's awesome. It's based around Mardi Gras down in New Orleans about the idea of these kids celebrating where one's not really into it. The rest of the friends wants to go out and party and have a great time because it's Mardi Gras, but he's kind of more into like, I want to learn about the underbelly of New Orleans. And that's also what brings in Tony Todd's character, which I thought was pretty cool, my friend.
Oh yeah, that's what I said. It's make a joke about it where it's like, we talk about like all of us going, all of us wanting to go out to New Orleans and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, we can see titties and drink anywhere, man. I want to go. Don't get me wrong, I'm all about seeing the New Orleans titties and stuff like that too. But it's like I want to go to the Voodoo Swamp tours, and I want to do all this kind of stuff. I want to do all that. I mean, I love the fact that even like I said. Adam Green with his, little cameo in the beginning where he's in the guys that are all like trying to party and they're like, "What the hell, man? You want to go and do this shit?" And like just because your girlfriend left you,
Right.
you can't see, you don't want to see titties or whatever. I love the fact that you got Joel, you got his best friend who I can't remember the actor's name, but every time I think about him, I think about the one role that he played in Not Another Teen Movie where he was the token black guy. He's like, I'm
He's
only
a
in this
token
movie
black guy, yeah.
because I'm the black guy. So every time I see him, I always just think of him, doing that line. So it's like, great.
Dion
But yeah, they're
Richard.
gonna yeah, yeah, they want to go. When he's like, so he's like, oh, you want to go do this? Well, I'm not gonna let you go do this alone. Okay, let's just go. And they go and meet Candyman, and he's like, oh yeah, we can't do the tours anymore. So they go and like find this, Perry Shin's character where he's like, oh yeah, yeah, I'll take you guys out. They take him out and stuff like that, and they get in the woods, and all of a sudden the one girl's like, yeah, we're in his town. We're Victor Crowley. Oh no, you don't know about Victor Crowley, and it's like I love again with the backstory of Victor Crowley, talk about him being deformed and stuff like that, kids making fun of him, letting off some fireworks, lit the house on fire, the dad's trying to go in and save, dad chops the freaking door down, kills Victor Crowley,
Ow.
boom, which is shout out to Kane Hodder for playing the Victor Crowley's dad too
Double
in the
duty.
movie, little double duty. But I love the fact, yeah, it's like that. So like it's your typical, you know, redneck story. Okay, now all of a sudden when people come into his neighborhood, they can hear him moaning and killing and the one thing that I think that's kind of ironic in this movie, it's a movie called Hatchet. There's definitely a hatchet in it, but only one person gets killed with a hatchet throughout this movie. But if you're into uh practical effects, this is where I love this movie. It's all
He's
the only thing that he did CGI that Adam was talking about was the getting rid of the wires and getting rid of like this kind of stuff like that. Everything wanted to be practical effects. I love the fact that like this movie is over the top, but I love it because it's over the top stupid blood. You get your head chopped off and it's a fountain of blood. I mean, it's shooting so much blood. There's like 9 million gallons of blood for one person's head.
that kill to the old dude where he just fucking pulled his jaw and head
Yeah.
back is on such a level of epic blood loss that it's just worth the recognition.
But not only, like I said, you got like that, you got the characters where you have like, they're on the boat and you have the old guy and the old girl. That guy's been in like 9 million movies everywhere. I love that guy. You know what I mean? To the
That's
to the
Bob
point that
Bigelow.
even yeah, but to the point where even the skeezy guy who's trying to be basically Girls Gone Wild fake, the Timu version of Girls Gone Wild is our freaking dude from freaking Teen Wolf. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Scott from Teen Wolf, the best friend. You know what I mean? I think it's great that you see him. And you're like, oh my lord, that guy is great. To the point where it's like, yeah, you got little things like that. You know what I mean? Eventually, like I said, in the franchise later on, we have a bunch of you know, people that I love that I've met. We've got some alumni and stuff like that. With Daniel Harris in there, who's a friend of mine, but you got Felissa Rose, who he's alumni. You got Tiffany, what's
Travis.
it, Shipton, Tiffany Shepis, that, is alumni and stuff like that. So it's like, I love the fact that, like, with, even though we're talking about Hatchet, just talking about that's the Hatchet series in general, it's another one of those ones where it's like, it's like, the Rob Zombies and the stuff like that, where you have a lot of the same actors that want to be, are in his stuff. And that's why I said I love about this series, and just the beginning of this series is great. And it's one of those ones where, like, you know most series, when they continue on, some of them kind of go downhill. I kind of feel like, even, and I don't mean this in a mean way, because I love Hatchet 1. I kind of feel like every Hatchet kind of got better. And it kind of just got like the franchise just got like a lot more cooler and a lot more bloodier and a lot more, you know what I mean? Where it's like usually like your first one is like your best one, and then your other ones are kind of all right. But it's, it kind of, Hatchet 2 is an awesome. Hatchet 3 is just as awesome. Victor Crowley was just as freaking awesome. So it's like, it's one of those ones where you got to give, praise to, to Adam and all those guys making that, where it was like, yeah, he made a series that kind of did well and continued on with it, but made them, you know, as good, if not better
Yes.
than some of the other ones.
Yeah, I don't know if I could honestly call them better sequels, but I know what you're saying,
Yeah,
Devil.
yeah, I'd like it, like,
And
to
I
the
know
where
you're
it's
not I
at
know you're not
par.
implying exactly. No, exactly. And I know you're not implying that because like Hatchet is so strong that it's like the the idea of Hatchet 2, 3, and Victor Crowley being better almost seems blasphemous. But I know what you're saying is because Adam, and this is Adam's credit, the writing and the directing of the follow-ups, for them to be considered on par with the original is something that's not heard of.
Yeah,
There's plenty of franchises out there that have a solid second movie. I do, and again, I'm just going to spout off a couple of quick titles, not for debate, but just for basic. But there's a lot of quality second sequels. Halloween 2, again, regardless of debate, is a quality sequel. Hellraiser 2, absolutely a quality sequel. Everybody knows that I will fucking die on the sword for Halloween 3. That is not for this discussion right now. But I mean, Hellraiser 3. I will fucking die on the sword for Hellraiser 3. But Hellraiser 2, very, very much on par with the original one. And there's other, you and I, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Frankly, as far as you and I are concerned, better sequel, but absolutely on par with the original Texas Chainsaw. But this is a franchise that's done 4 movies, and they're all on par, if not Hatchet because of the OG being like maybe a step above, where everybody else is right there fighting it out for glory because they're quality movies. And
yeah.
that's a testament to Adam. That is.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, and like I said, to me, the only thing in comparison with it, but not even really movie wise, but I've said it because of us being music guys and stuff like that. The closest one that I can kind of see is like, me and you, band that me and you are, friends with, fond of. There's always been like the band Dope.
Yeah.
That first album, I love Felons, but every
Yeah.
album after that was just as good, if not better. It was one of those
Yeah.
ones where like every album was just, and you don't really see that very often in the music industry. You can have a band that has a really good first album and then maybe has a good second album, and then the third album's kind of shitty, and the fourth album's got a couple good songs, and then maybe once in a while they'll put a fifth album like, okay, it's back to old school, but maybe you don't really have one where it's like from beginning to end
Yeah.
every album is just consistently, and that's how I kind of feel, with Dope. That's what I kind of feel with
Yeah.
with Adam Green and the Hatchet series. Now, granted, like I
Yeah.
said, us being Adam Green fans, I love all the stuff he does. I'm a huge Holliston, like you said, huge
Yeah.
Holliston fan. Digging the Morrow, Frozen. It's like Rob Zombie.
Hmm.
Adam Green is one of those guys who just can't do any wrong.
Yeah.
Are
We are
are are
Adam Green
some
people.
yeah, are some movies better than others? Yes, I'm gonna there definitely are. There are ones I like better, but I still like it. But like I said, Hatchet's one of those series where like even in a world of like the old school, especially what they're doing, you know what I mean? You look at Friday the 13th. There are some in that series that are good. And there are some of those series that are just shitty. Nightmare
Yeah.
on Elm Street. Even me being a Halloween guy, there are
Yeah.
some Halloween movies that some people don't like and some people do like.
Totally.
I'll pretty much die for most of them, except for, obviously Resurrection. You know what I mean? Like I said, shout out to our VP, our alumni,
Brad Loree.
Brad
We love you,
Loreen.
bro.
We love Michael Myers in that movie, but we just don't like the movie and Michael Myers in
I
general.
I can't I can't do Halloween meets the real world. I don't
Yeah.
have it in me. I
So like I
cannot
said, for
fucking
every
do it.
kind of series, you always like that's like I said, even with Scream, even with these ones, like everyone, you can't say, especially with a series that at least has four. Think of
Yeah.
a franchise that has four movies, and even ones like us that we like super love. Like even go with me with like Puppet Masters. I love
Yeah.
Puppet Masters, but Subspecies is good, but not all four of them are solid to the point where every one of these Hatchet movies and then Victor Crowley is
Yeah.
solid film. And like I said,
Same.
it's very rare to see that, in a franchise, especially in a franchise in this world. And it just goes like a testament to one Adam Green, but being able to do what he does, more independently versus, having that Hollywood kind of blowing up your smoke and doing this and telling you need to do this and you got to do that. You know what I mean? Him keeping it, to where he's got the creative control. And I think that's why this film in the Hatchet series does so well, is because he runs the ship 100%. He doesn't
Yeah.
have
Like
anybody
I'll
else.
kill. I'll kill for Hellraiser, but when it comes to 5, 6, and 7, if you're like, let's talk about 5, 6, and 7, I'm gonna be right here, be like, do we have to?
Yeah, yeah. Now, like that doesn't say. I mean, as far as I know, as of right now, there aren't going to be any more Hatchet films and or related Hatchet films.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, I mean, yeah, maybe if he does some more, maybe Hatchet, 4 or Victor Crowley 2, maybe not as good, but I kind of feel like the consistency of him, it's going to be a series that's always, as long as he's running the ship,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be good. And like I said, it's just Hatchet in a series is just, especially just the OG Hatchet, it's just a good time. I mean, it's just over the top, freaking bloody gore, fun, stupid shit, makes you laugh, makes you go, holy shit. Maybe makes you puke depending on, your level of gore that you can kind of deal with. But you know what I mean? It's so great. And like I said, it brings, it brought, Kane Hodder kind of back into the fold again, you know what I mean? To
It
show
really
you like
did.
how of a massive, amazing freaking, guy this guy is. And to the point where like, yes, it's he was, Jason, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to argue with it, but I mean, I think that if I had to choose which character I like better, you know, Jason Voorhees, and let's just it's specifically just Kane Hodder's Jason Voorhees versus
Yes.
Victor Crowley. I think I like the character of Victor Crowley way better than I like him playing Jason. As much as I love him playing Jason, and he is my Jason. He's the Jason
Same.
that I feel is the best Jason. And that's not, not saying anything against all the other Jasons. You know what I mean?
Nope.
We met, or Ari Lehman, and a couple of the other ones. Warren
Yeah.
Turret and stuff like that. We met all
Warren
those
Gillette. I
guys.
got a signed Warren
Yeah,
Gillette machete right
yeah,
up
they're
there on
all
my
really
shelf.
really cool. But to me, it's always been
My
Kane
first my
Hodder.
my first horror tattoo was Jason.
Yeah, he's always been my, what I if I go through what Jason I loved, I've always loved his version of Jason. And as much as I love the Jason, I still think the Victor Crowley character is my probably favorite character he's ever done. Maybe except for joking around Wishmaster. Come on, man. He was awesome in Wishmaster. But
Yeah,
anyway, no. Definitely Victor Crowley is probably my favorite Kane Hodder, Kane Hodder
totally. Totally.
character.
And that's also why I thought it was actually incredibly important, Devil, to talk about the fact that when he got that Icon Achievement Award, that they had the wherewithal to design it off Victor Crowley, a character that he genuinely owns. He's the only guy. And I
Yeah.
remember, like, I got the first time I met Kane Hodder way the hell back in the day. Of course, the first thing I had him sign was a Jason 8x10. But then it wasn't that long after. I mean, it was a little while later, but like a few years later, I remember just saying to myself and being like, Vamp, you need him on Hatchet. That character, that style, that franchise is just so fucking good that
Yeah.
you need him on that. And I'm really glad that I made that decision and understood what I was saying to myself, that I have this now little fun little project. It's not like super up there, but I enjoy it casually for that first film where, I did have Kane sign that movie because I do love it. You and I met and interviewed Adam together, and that's when I had him sign Hatchet too. You and I, went out to a different con down the line where Joel David Moore was at, and I had him sign Hatchet, despite the fact that I love him in Grandma's Boy and he's awesome in Dodgeball. It's like I need to add to my Hatchet. That movie's just so good. But also, that being said, as we move towards the obituaries, the other thing that's very cool about Hatchet, that's very much on par with 2001 Maniacs, is the villain is the victor. You go into this final watery fight scene that does make me chuckle, almost like it's an ode to Friday the 13th. But you think that the girl is going to survive as the final girl, and then you think that she's going to survive with the, for lack of a better term, the love interest of Joel David Moore, ultimately for her to pull up what she thought is his arm attached to his body, and it is only his ripped off arm.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about that. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's just one of those like iconic freaking, yeah, you're gonna, you know, we're gonna, maybe, Adam probably didn't, he probably didn't know that he was gonna be able to do this as a franchise, but he was just like, you know what, if this just happens to, you know, catch on some wings and get some fire to it, I want to make sure that, this is definitely a character that we want to see later on and stuff like that. And like I said, just adding a little extra to the Kane Hodder thing. I mean, the first time I met Kane Hodder, man, it was years and years ago at a con, and somebody was had these glasses or candles or something like that, and it had like some good stuff on it, and it had the evil stuff on it. And I was joking around. I was like, "Hey, man, you got to sign the evil stuff, not the good stuff. Come on, man, you're fucking, you're Jason Voorhees." And he looks at me. Never met this guy before. I mean, this is freaking one of the, like I say, Kane Hodder is freaking big. He jokes around. Met him years, later. He put his arm around you, go, ha ha, gotta love this life, with a bunch of hot chicks around him, and almost dislocates your shoulder because he doesn't realize how strong his freaking arms are. Like, not intentionally meaning to hurt you, but yeah, he put a hurting on you for a little bit.
Oh
But yeah,
man, back
so he
when he used to do the real
used to
choke
do the
versus the
choke.
fake choke,
Yeah,
when I took my
yeah,
photo with him and he he gave me the offer, I was like, oh no, I want the real one, dude. And if you look at the photo of me in that photo, if you look at that photo with me and him, my eyes are big. Because don't get me wrong, he's not out to hurt me, but he's choking me.
Yeah, but that's so that for yeah, so that this so he was like, you know what? I'm gonna fucking kill you, but I'm not gonna do that in order. Just spare you embarrassment. And then I leave. I go, to Mrs. Devil. I'm like, so I just met Kane Hodder, the Jason, one of my freaking heroes as far as like horror villain guys and stuff like that. He basically just told me that he was gonna kill me and then rape my dead body to spare me the embarrassment of having sex with me while I was alive. I'm like, how cool is that to be like your first, introduction to somebody? Like that's insane. But yeah, I mean that's just, I mean, years later, Kane, met him 9 million times and got to hang out with him and stuff like that. He's just a cool guy. It's one of those ones where we talk about where characters and these villains that are always these big, huge, muscly, burly guys that are just mean and monstrous and fucking tear everybody's heads off
Yeah.
are like the biggest puppy dogs in the entire world. It's just such a nice guy. Unless you're a fake penis from Felissa Rose, he doesn't like those guys apparently very much because he
Definitely
rips
doesn't like
Felissa's
those.
penis.
Yeah. Yeah, he was less than cordial to Felicia's penis,
Yeah.
but we brought her a new penis to sign.
Yep. Yep.
So maybe somewhere down the line, Devil and I will do a fun little, when we've got some cool shit to show off. But maybe when we've gotten a few more things, maybe we'll do a fun little episode just because it's fun, where we'll talk a little bit about the V&D decor that we've gotten to collect over the first few seasons of the V&D podcast. So that's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting one there for sure. But yeah, he Kane wasn't particularly fond of Felissa's phallus. Say all of that 5 times fast. The obituaries, my
Yeah.
friend. I mean, Hatchet is fucking awesome, dude. It's so good. But of course, man, your pick, you start.
I mean, to me, like I said, to me, I'm gonna put it in that same realm where it's like, to me, it's like I said, I'd love to put this as a 10 or a 9,
Yeah.
but you know what I
Hey,
mean. But that's my love of it. But in reality, again, it's in that 8.0, it's that 7.0. I kind of feel like, even though we're gonna discuss where we want to put it as far as both of these movies, I kind of feel like this is gonna be one of those ones where like we talked about, with better sequels where, we went with Devil's Rejects over Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and we had we just kind of in the mind of Rob Zombie being like, what the fuck would you ever think that, Devil's Rejects is better than Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? Because obviously I was, paying a lot, and or quote unquote ripping off, but paying a lot of homage to that stuff. So I kind of feel like, Adam Green would be like, really, you think Hatchet is better than 2001 Maniacs with this one? So
yeah,
you know what I mean? But to me, I don't know. I mean, I think that like, you know, I feel like 2001 Maniacs is fun. I think it's a fun movie. I think it's a movie where not everybody's gonna like it. It's not gonna be everybody's cup of tea, but it's interesting. I think Hatchet has that maybe slight edge only because if you're into gore, horror, that iconic, Michael Myers, Freddy, Jason, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those, the villains where you kind of root for them. People, there's an iconic person and stuff like that. I feel like Hatchet is one of those ones that people are going to gravitate a little bit more towards than
yeah,
2001 Maniacs. I think that people, obviously will love, 2001 Maniacs. I think fans of that series or people of that movie like it. But I kind of feel like, Hatchet is that, even though it's not newer, it's that newer of a series. You know what I mean? I put it in there like with the screams and stuff like that,
yeah,
where it's iconic. People love that franchise. People love it. And like I said, I think the only reason why I say that with where we had it for an 8.0 and a 7.5 for both of these ones. I think, just because of the iconicness and maybe the fact that, like we were talking about with that, with Kane Hodder kind of owning that that character and that character being such an iconic and cool character that I think, depending on where we want to put um 2001 Maniacs, I think we should just give that slight edge to the Hatchet series or to the Hatchet.
Sure. I'm with you, Devil. I am. And here's the thing. So if I'm breaking them down specifically with the story that 2001 Maniacs tells, the bit of a twist with the fact that the town doesn't actually exist, and the end of what you thought was going to be the final people, there's a unique and individuality about 2001 Maniacs that I really love and I think holds a lot of value versus Hatchet, which under simply normal circumstances, but I'm going to explain my motive. So just kind of let me roll for a second. Where Hatchet is a much more traditional slasher movie. You've got the epic slasher who's who's just wrecking shop. So there is, in my opinion, story wise value in 2001 Maniacs over Hatchet in that regard. However, the idea, just like you said, of a character being able to not only be its own standalone solid character, but have multiple films that don't feel watered down is incredibly valuable to acknowledge. And that's just like we've already said a few times that I really appreciated the award ceremony for recognizing that, but is also important there. So while I do think that there's a lot of just solidarity in the product that is 2001 Maniacs versus a slightly more traditional already done style of a movie that Hatchet does as a slasher film, the fact that it started off so strong with Kane Hodder in this now becoming, in our opinions, iconic character. Whether we get more movies, that's up to Adam. But the fact that you get this movie that's got Kane, Robert, and Tony, shout out to the late great Tony Todd, right off the bat. Not that there's not value in Robert Englund, Lynn Shay, and Giuseppe Andrews. It starts off so strong just in the style of iconic characters, but then has a base because it sets the foundation for what ultimately has become a very strong franchise. So it is one of those things where if I look at the two of them straight up head to head, they're very much eights, in my opinion, with the debate because I don't personally think we need to leave this one up to the Fangs and Infernos. No disrespect to you, Fangs and Infernos, we love you. I think Devil knows where I'm going with this. Um, I like them as eights, I really do. But like you said, I think that the idea of a standalone character that the fans are going to gravitate to, understand, and become genuine fans of in Victor Crowley is what does allow the edge over by no means a not quality fun horror movie in 2001 Maniacs that I just think people are going to be like, dude, I love 2001 Maniacs. That movie's fucking great. But you can talk to people about just how fucking bitchin' of a character Victor Crowley is. you can love a movie as a whole, like 2001 Maniacs, but I don't think anybody's going to be like, damn, man, that fucking redneck Confederate crazy person that Robert Englund was. They're going to understand. They're going to know that character and they're going to like him. They're going to love a bloodthirsty, new age Leatherface kind of thing. And the fact that you do get to juggle that paranormal aspect of whether Victor Crowley is really there, since he technically was injured or murdered by his dad. And that's what I think is very, very cool, because the whole swamp thing, that's what the myth is all based around, is the Victor Crowley curse, where it's kind of like Warriors come out and play for 2001 Maniacs. It's when that town wants to come out and play. So while I do think they're incredibly strong equally as eights, I do think that there's value in understanding what Hatchet did, created, and executed that does give it the edge. So what do you think, Devil? Do we want to do eights at eights with the victory going to Hatchet, or do you want some separation in 8 and 7.5? I leave it up to you, my friend, because I do think we agree on the victor.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think putting them kind of both together at the same might not be as, what I mean, where it's at, where it's like, you know what I mean. So I think if we do, if we do one, we have to, and I think bumping. I mean, as much as I'd like to say, that 2001 Maniacs is an 8 and then 8.5, it's like, do I really want to do Hatchet as such a high of a
Right.
film? So it's, to me, it's like, I think 7.5 is a good score. It's not
Yeah.
demeaning 2001 at all. But I think, unrealistically, an 8.5 out of 10 for a Hatchet is just a little bit, like I said, as much as we'd love to give it the 9 or the 10,
That's
in
pretty
our hearts, and
generous.
we love that film, it's still a little too high of a scale, where I think eight's a good. I think we should probably just do the 8 and 7.5. I think is a good one, where versus 8 and 8.
Sounds great to me, Devil. So that's the way it's going to be there, Fangs and Infernos. Victory to the devil in our redneck horror as we put Hatchet at an 8, taking out 2001 Maniacs at a 7.5. This has been a great one, and we really, really enjoyed this one. I really loved this one as a head to head showdown. I think this one was very, very cool. So, Fangs and Infernos, we appreciate you, but also keep in mind, our friends in Rock and Horror Apparel also take care of our merch store as well. All of their discounts that they do, whether it be discounts during the summer or various holidays, make sure that you guys are liking and following Mark and Lizzie at rockandhorror.com and Rock and Horror Apparel on Facebook and Instagram, because whenever they run those discounts, they apply for our store as well. So we really appreciate the love that you show us, but you're also showing very much the love to two people who Devil and I hold as our nearest and dearest. When it comes to independence, please support independent businesses, especially museums. They're incredibly valuable, incredibly important. And our dearest beloved John Kozik, who owns the Salem Witchboard Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore down in Baltimore, Maryland. He is an absolutely great guy. He's one of the best people Devil and I know. So definitely follow all of the socials and support those independent museums to keep them thriving. When it comes to, just something enjoyable to sip on and relax, with your Mrs. Devil or your Mrs. Vampire or your Mrs. Zombie, Brutalities is the way to do it. So many great flavors, so much great respect for what they do. They do a lot of work with Devil and I's beloved Wednesday 13. So we love everything that Brutalities is about. And we're very, very happy to have them as a partner. And of course, our friends at Twisted Vines, horror decor, custom made Ouija boards, voodoo dolls, jewelry. Saren and Chris, they get it, they understand, and they love everything. And while they're not a partner, we haven't mentioned him in a little while, and I just kind of feel that we want to give a shout out to just a good friend of myself and the devil and our friend Aaron when it comes to Coney Island Saucery. If you just love hot sauce and you just love awesome flavor to add to your food, check out ConeyIslandSaucery.com. There it is, right there.
Slayer.
Hell yeah. When
Slayer.
it comes to Raining Blood from Slayer, they do have a partnership with Slayer, and they've got just so many great sauces. And Aaron's just always been great to me and Devil, and we just want to give him a little shout out for everything that he does because he's just great people, and Devil and I love to shop with him. So a little bit of shout out to Aaron and Coney Island Saucery for just being awesome. So that's the way it's going to be there, Fangs and Infernos and our RIPs. Again, victory to the Devil on this one, as again, Hatchet at an 8.0 takes out 2001 Maniacs at a 7.5. But we see you guys real soon for some more fun and a little bit more gore. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends Chris and Saren Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you, Fangs and Infernos, are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah. What's up? It's the devil here, and we're gonna talk about more devil in movies. This time we're gonna talk about Dead in Tombstone. Have you seen this yet? Oh yeah, it's got Danny Trejo, Machete. It's got Anthony Michael Hall, you know, from Halloween, the new ones. Maybe you don't know, but Weird Science. Anyway, it's got Dina Myers in it. Starship Troopers. And it's got Mickey Rourke as Satan. The devil himself. Yes. Not this devil, but the devil anyway. And you know I love me some Mickey Rourke. I love some wrestlers. I love some Sin City. Anyway, it's a cool movie, Western. You know, Danny Trejo comes back, makes a deal with the devil, goes after his avenging killers, and oh yeah, we've got all kinds of gunfights, all kinds of brutality, all kinds of death, all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah, you should check it out. Check out Dead in Tombstone, because if not, maybe me, or maybe Mickey Rourke might come and check you out and see where your funny burns.
All right, there, Fangs and Infernos. We got a brand new showdown to discuss with you. And this is a fun one for us. It's got a lot of realism mixed with some semi-realism, mixed with some pretty much absurdity Devil, that I would definitely say is agreed upon for sure, especially when it comes to one particular scene with one of the movies that we're going to discuss. But this is going to be a fun one there, my friend, especially with all of like the hype around like Netflix's monster series in particular, where, myself and Mrs. Vamp, we're definitely big fans of that series. I can imagine that you and Mrs. Devil are probably very much into that as well, for sure, because when it came to like Dahmer, absolutely killed it. Menendez brothers, I was a fan personally. I kind of liked that courtroom drama style. Mrs. Vamp, not so much. She thought it was actually pretty weak. Me overall, like I said, I enjoyed it. I just think they should have pushed it down the line personally. I don't think they should have done it season two. I thought they should have built a little bit of a build up, a little bit of a reputation, especially with how strong Dahmer was, and then maybe brought it in later. But anyway, they just did Ed Gein, and that was absolutely fantastic. And Fangs and Infernos, if you haven't figured out what Devil and I are alluding to, we are going to talk about serial killers.
Oh yeah, we're gonna, like you said, some realism, about some real serial killers and or, you know, one in particular is a real serial killer movie. The other one's kind of like a combination of a real serial killer mixed in with a little bit of fantasy and stuff like that. But both of them definitely you know, add their points to shit that really happened and then Hollywoodized the hell out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like everything else, you know what I mean? It's so great, but you know what I mean? It's one of those ones where yeah, I mean to the point where even like something like Silence of the Lambs. I remember a lot of that. Obviously like Buffalo Bill being kind of like based off a little bit of like Ted Bundy a little bit and things
Yeah.
like this. But how many people like think that like even like Hannibal Lecter like oh yeah he was a real serial killer and I'm like no, Hannibal Lecter is a fictional character from a
Yes.
book. You know what I mean? Now, granted, yes, he is based off of some real serial killers, but the character or the person Hannibal Lecter was never really a real person, and that's kind of like with the one where we're doing Henry, a Portrait of the Serial Killers, a little bit of a realistic. It's a little bit of the realism and stuff like that of a few serial killers at the time and stuff like that mixed in, and then obviously Ted Bundy is obviously about Ted Bundy. So
Yeah.
but like I said, there's been a lot of good ones. Like you said, the Netflix has done that. I love the Manhunter series that they had with the
Definitely.
FBI and things like that. I really thought that was really good. I'm looking forward to they're gonna do a Lizzie Borden one, but I heard that one's getting pushed a little bit further on the shelf. That they're actually going to do the Eileen Warnos one, so that's going to be kind of cool to do.
It's weird. Like, I'm hoping that's not the case, but that's, of course, that you know better than anybody. And of course, the Fangs and Infernos that picked up on it as well. Like, my fascination when it comes to that. So I'm hoping that's not a
Yeah.
case
Yeah, I
because they,
mean, they haven't, like I said, they haven't said that they're not doing it. I think it's just they're gonna do Eileen first and then do the Lizzie Borden one. So it hasn't been scrapped yet. But like I said, I like it. You know what I mean? Obviously, like you said, the Jeffrey Dahmer one was freaking awesome. Like I said, I
so
didn't
good.
mind. I didn't mind the Menendez one. You know what I
I
mean?
liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty decent. I always thought those guys were whiny and shitty anyway, so it was
Yeah.
like to the point of it. But I thought it was pretty decent, and the Ed Gein one was really good. I mean, it definitely took a lot of different liberties. I like the way the Jeffrey Dahmer one is definitely a little bit more realistic, where the
Yes.
Ed Gein was kind of more fantasized and stuff like that. Because obviously they put plays into like the stuff that he was based off of Ed Gein and kind of throwing that into it and stuff like that. I thought that was super
Yeah, but that and
interesting.
that gave it some charm that I thought was actually pretty cool because it had that Ed Gein realism that is a trademark of the show, of course. But I kind of liked the fact that they showed the Hollywood aspect of it, where you actually had somebody who was playing Alfred Hitchcock, somebody who was
Yeah.
playing Norman Bates, and somebody who was obviously playing Buffalo Bill, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought that was a cool aspect. But yeah, you're definitely right about that one, Devil.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's gonna be fun, to talk about that. And like I said, just because we talk and we love serial killers, don't mean that we're condone murder. Even though I mean, I think it's fun, but maybe we're not condoning it 100%. It really depends on
I'm
your
thirsty.
on your taste or your personal preference or whether or not you believe in that stuff. But anyway, it should be a good one. We'll talk about stuff, and that's what I like about these kind of things, especially like the serial killer docs and movies. Yeah, I mean there are a lot of really good ones. There are a lot of shitty ones, and we'll talk about that a little bit with Ted Bundy, where it's this film is kind of in between, I think, of the really good serial killer movies and the really shitty ones. But like I said, it's all over the place and stuff like that. I mean, obviously the big good ones, especially for the main one. Like I said, even with that, with them doing that monster, doing the Eileen Wuornos. I love the monster movie. I thought Charlize Theron was a really, really good one. And it's not
Yeah,
ones, and I wish they would do a little bit more of those because it's not like I mean, there are a lot of them. You just don't hear a lot about female serial killers. Serial
right.
killers that particularly have always been men. And like I said, even throughout history, there's definitely been female serial killers. It's just that the amount of them is a very small percentage of that. So I like the fact that of all the ones that they're gonna do, they made a movie about, or all the ones that the monster series is gonna do. It's kind of cool. I mean, even though like theoretically speaking, even with the Lizzie Borden one, was she a serial killer? Is she a serial killer? I mean, I wouldn't really go as far. I mean,
No.
the story, the monsters, that's necessarily about serial killers, even though most of them have been about serial killers. But the Menendez wouldn't be serial killers. That's just about people who are considered monsters. So it's people
Yeah,
go, well, Lizzie Borden's not a serial killer. But I'm like, well, neither was the Menendez, and yet you're going to do that. I mean, Menendez, whether or not they killed him or not, or kind of like Lizzie Borden, because people believe that they killed him. Some people don't believe, but unfortunately, the only difference between Menendez and Lizzie is the Menendez were actually accused and trialed and
yeah.
found guilty of killing their parents, where Lizzie Borden was actually never found guilty, even though most of us do believe that she did take the take the axe and give him 40 whacks, but that's all speculation and hearsay.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And so before we jump right into this, and Monster was actually kind of on my radar actually for this particular showdown. It was actually a very, very strong contender because I also love Christina Ricci as well. Um, but I went this direction with the Ted Bundy movie, the 2002 Ted Bundy movie, which actually does feature TMS V&D alumni Tiffany Shepis, which is very, very cool. So the next time that she comes back around, you and I will definitely have to touch base again with her. Also, just because we're gonna want to say hi to our buddy, but also be like, hey, we featured one of your movies in one of our showdowns, and so that would be pretty cool. Like, the thing I find very interesting about the monster movie is exactly what you said. There's no real focus on female serial killers. But I ended up going with this one mostly due to the fact that of all the train wreck movies that are out there as far as Ted Bundy goes, but also just train wreck movies out there as far as serial killers go, I personally think there's a lot of strength to this movie. There's a lot of ludicrous to this movie as well. Don't get me wrong. And again, just like I said, Fangs and Infernos, there's a particular scene that's early in the movie, so Devil and I will talk about it shortly. That's insanely idiotic that somebody wouldn't have been like, that can't be a thing. Um, but overall, I did find this movie to actually be quite strong. I thought it was pretty well acted. There were certain things I didn't love that I'll put light on when it's appropriate, but like overall, I thought the idea behind the movie, the overall execution, the way that Ted would try to convince his victims, all of which was pretty accurate, leading up to the end of the movie, which is kind of my favorite of the part of the movie, which where it starts to actually splice in real footage they have of the real Ted Bundy when he was on death row and being tried and things like that. And that's the thing I thought was actually pretty interesting. And a little kind of short like prelude to this, and then Devil, I'll let you take it away, my friend, is that Mrs. Vamp and I were we stumbled across this movie on Tubi. It was already on my shelf because I would always pick up serial killer movies periodically in stores if they were at a price I was willing to pay for, knowing that the majority of the movies were just going to be kind of trashy. But like, I like collecting Dahmer movies, Ted Bundy movies, Charles Manson movies, etc. But for a lot of the fangs that are familiar with, if you're familiar with Tubi, they would run little previews or show little stills and stuff and make you decide whether or not you kind of wanted to click on it. And there was a lot of things they were showing that we just thought looked stupid. Like Ted was making these really funny, weird faces, and it was just kind of bizarre. And we were just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe they're fucking up another serial killer movie. But we ended up deciding to just watch it. Just be like, look, instead of being keyboard warriors, let's just watch this fucking movie and then we can be real keyboard warriors. And overall, she and I actually found it to actually be relatively strong. But anyway, when it comes to Ted Bundy 2002, it's a very, very straightforward premise. It is the build up and the to Ted Bundy as the Ted Bundy that we know. There's not a lot that comes to it when it comes to the early life. There is a little bit of build up to it. There's a little bit of design scenes to kind of get you familiar with how Ted became Ted. But the majority of the movie is actually Ted Bundy as we know him, which is luring women with his charm, you know, taking advantage of them, ultimately murdering them, living a double life with his wife. And then is he cheating on her? Does she think this is real? So on and so forth. His escape from prisons and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about this. Like I said, as much throughout throughout the showdown, it may seem like I'm shitting on this Ted Bundy movie. It's kind of like how we've done before with a bunch of those. Where rot. Like I said, I think we talk about Rotten Tell everyone, but how that's like
Right.
the premier Easter film, or like the Lesbos. We're talking about with exotic.
Yeah,
When it
totally.
comes to the Ted Bundy, this is the best, other than the newest one that recently came out with Zac Efron. I feel like this is the best Ted Bundy movie,
Yeah.
even though it's not the greatest serial killer movie in
No.
general. But it's the better. I mean, like I said, you compare to some of the other serial killer movies that are out there. Oh, so many of them are so bad. Now there are
Oh,
some really, really good ones, but for the most part, a lot of them are just bad. I mean, it's just like serial killer movies are kind of like like dragon, or the shark, or the Krampus of movies, where yeah, you're just everybody and their mother has a serial killer movie, from freaking Joe Bob down the street that made it with his video camera in 1982 all the way till now. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it with a lot of them. A lot of them are just low budget, really shitty and stuff like that. And like I said, there's definitely some. We met the guy that was that we saw that from from Teen Wolf, and obviously from Pee Wee's Big Adventure, but was Gacy, which I
oh yeah,
feel
Mark
like
Holt.
is, yeah, Mark Holden, which I think is still like probably one of the best Gacy movies out there. I really, really love that one. You know what I
That
mean?
one was so close, Devil, to be my pick. It
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah, I mean, and there have been other ones. There was ones that I was talking about before. Like I really like that monster. Like we said, with the Monster series with Jeffrey Dahmer. But I really like one that I was thinking about doing. But it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of a. I mean, I like the movie, but it's kind of weird because it's called My Friend Dahmer, which is
Yeah,
basically kind of a prequel
mhm.
before Jeffrey Dahmer becomes Jeffrey Dahmer. It's all made up. It's just not, even though there are bits and pieces of his real life that they you found out about, like him killing animals and things like that. But in
Yeah,
general, this movie is just basically like, what was Jeffrey Dahmer like as a teenager or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, off the wall. But I always thought that movie was cool. But yeah, when it comes to like movies, like I said, but this Ted Bundy, it's good. Like I said, it's straight. I mean, it's basically straightforward. I mean, like you said, it's they're not reinventing the wheel when it comes to this, because they kept it pretty accurate to for the most part. I mean, obviously Hollywoodized and did a couple other things and liberties and stuff, but pretty kept it pretty accurate to like what Ted Bundy was. You know what I mean? The type of people that he would go after. You know what I mean? The ways that he went after the obviously, like we talked about with with Silence of the Lambs. Where Buffalo Bill is oh, can you help me move this couch because I have a broken arm, with the broken arm thing. The only thing that I found out in this one, and my only really big gripe, and that's not necessarily a huge gripe, but the guy who played Ted Bundy wasn't really as good looking as he should be. You know what I mean? Like I said,
Were
he's not a bad. I'm
so
not. I'm not
annoyed
saying
by
he's a
that.
bad looking actor, but Ted Bundy was always known. I mean, now granted, people are gonna look at Ted Bundy now. If you're an 18-year-old, 16-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl, because he was going after a lot of young girls, so those 19 to college girls now in 2026 would look at Ted Bundy and be like, ugh, this dude is ugly looking. But as far as like that 70s and
Yeah.
80s vibe, he was considered a really good looking guy. I mean, you see those pictures, clean, looked nice, he was articulate, he was very charming. And so that is the reason why he was able to persuade these girls to come back to him or help him or do all this stuff like that. I mean, even like, even in that, even in the real thing where he went on the kind of killing spree, I think in that one night in college where he killed like 5 or 6 girls in like one night in this one
Yeah.
college and stuff like that. It's what I mean, and you think about it, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like I said, with the newer one with Zac Efron, man, again, I think Zac Efron's probably the best looking guy that's
Mhm.
played Ted Bundy in all these movies. But I mean, but that's what it was, But he was considered a really really good looking guy. Which you have like some of these other ones, like you know don't get me wrong. Like I said, I love the monster Jeffrey Dahmer, but Evan Peters was definitely way too good looking to be Jeffrey Dahmer. And even though they did make him a little bit slight uglier, I think Charlie Hunnam is definitely still too good looking to be Ed Gein. But you know what I mean. So with those ones, I think I found it was like the opposite, where like you have these. I mean, even the one we were talking about with before, because I mean yes, they made her ugly, but yet I know who she is. But even Charlize Theron in Monster, I mean, I think they did a really good job of making her kind of look how Eileen did, and that just like that home body kind of look and stuff like that. Where, like I said, this one, is meant to be, a serial killer that, was good looking. Now, like I said, there has been a few serial killers that have been considered really good looking guys. But most serial killers are usually your mama's boys that are not that very good looking, stuff like that. So that's what I mean with in the sense of where I didn't. My only really huge gripe of this movie was you have a role where you need a good looking guy. And to
Yeah.
me, I think he was a little bit too older to be considered Ted Bundy too. I think, I mean, even though Ted Bundy was in his 20s and 30s when he was doing all of this stuff, he looked a lot younger. And the guy who played in this just looked like he was a 30-year-old guy or something like that. That was my really only big gripe. Not saying that, the actor was bad. I thought he played pretty good. I thought he was, I mean, it was definitely a low budget and some cheese in it, but that's not necessarily his fault as an actor, but yeah, that's like my only really big gripe, other than the big huge gripe that we'll talk about, that
Right
didn't make
now.
sense.
No, absolutely, for sure. And that's the thing about this movie, because like that's you're totally right about that. Because so the funny thing is, the precursor that I was saying about me and Mrs. Vamp is a lot of the little there's a scene in the movie that they were using in that little Tubi prequel thing that they're like video that they run where they run like a scene from the movie where he's driving his car and he's making this really weird face like this very creepy like not like creepy but like you're a creep face, like he smells something bad, like while he's looking around awkwardly out of his car. And again, that just gets to like back what we were saying about, him being, very sophisticated and a good looking guy at that time and so on and so forth. So us being kind of introduced to him through that scene already had our kind of like red flags flying. But again, ultimately, it's just whatever decisions that were made by the actor or the director or so on and so forth. Don't need to get too deeply into it when it comes to that. Now, yes, there's two other gripes that I have and have always had with this movie that one I knew would be in our notes for this movie. And the other one was in the notes that we put in this movie that it was just something that I thought that I would have to address. One, being that this is a Ted Bundy movie, like specifically supposed to be about Ted Bundy, and the fact that they use real Ted Bundy footage at the end of the movie, it actually bothered me a bit that they use different victim names and stuff like that. That doesn't make sense to me. Again, using the Dahmer series as an example, because as far as a serial killer docu series, I'll go so far as to say, as of right now, it's the gold standard. I thought Evan was fantastic, and I really liked the way that they did the series. But all the victim names were proper. The overall scenarios leading up to their relationships slash deaths were all pretty accurate, like very accurate. That always did bother me that these victims were not the technical victims of Ted Bundy. I was like, that's a problem for me if you're doing a Ted Bundy movie and ultimately including real Ted Bundy footage. It's like, look, back in 2002, we weren't quite as sensitive as we are now. So I hold it actually I'm a little more critical of it than I'd be right now. If this movie came out in like 20, I'll say 2015, because I remember the Zac Efron version coming out kind of like not too long before the 2020s, somewhere in that ballpark. I think it's like 2018, 2019 or something like that. Anyway, like if this movie came out in more of the let's be sensitive time, okay, fair enough. Even though the Dahmer series was like, fuck your feelings, we're making it accurate. I'm a little less critical. This movie came out damn near 25 years ago when we were still pretty uncensored. So the fact that they were kind of unwilling to go by the use the actual victims' names while trying to do a Ted Bundy movie, I really always did have a problem with that. But again, ultimately, I still thought the movie was very strong. Now, there's certain things that still to this day blow my mind. And ever since Mrs. Vamp and I watched the movie for the first time, I've watched it a few times since because I think it's, like I said, relatively strong. And every now and then I get into my serial killer vibe, and it's just kind of a fun time. So the fact that there's a scene where, and I knew you'd be all over this, my friend, the fact that there's a scene where he is carrying a body in, like, wrapped up in a body bag slash wrapping that makes the form of a body, and putting it in his car as like a group of friends or a family like walking their dog is literally walking by, walking their dog or whatever, and doesn't react, doesn't notice, kind of ignores it completely, never made sense to me and kind of pissed me off, even for a movie that I do enjoy. Because I'm like, how does nobody, even a stagehand, how does nobody speak up and be like, we can't do it that way? You gotta, at the bare minimum, wait for them to pass and then bring the body out behind them, you know? Because even if they've walked by to where there's a little bit of distance, at least you can kind of chalk that up to, well, maybe they just thought he was holding up like a rug, like a rolled up rug. But they walk by him right as he's doing it, and this body is in the shape of a body. That
Yeah.
that scene has always pissed me off epically. And I was aware of that scene when I decided to choose this movie. And I knew it'd be a topic of discussion, but I was down for it because it's so absurd.
Yeah, I was waiting for him to be like, getting ready for Halloween early or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, my only thing with the using false names versus real names that I mean I can't speak for the people who made this film and stuff like that. But I'm assuming that because of other films that have done it, they've done it because of the just to not demoralize the victims and stuff like that, where so many people are like, oh, you're just doing this to make money and cash cow. So a lot of times with these films, I mean, they do change the names because the families have come out and said, no, you're not allowed. Cause I mean, because even with those victims, you still have to get permission to, to use their names and stuff like that in these films a lot of times. So, I mean, I could imagine that might be a reason why, or they just didn't
Yeah,
want to
that's
deal, or they just didn't want to deal, or they didn't even, they were like, we're just going to change the names completely so that we don't have to worry about, that dealing with any of the, the victims' families coming after,
that is
or
true,
even if it,
Devil, because the
or
monster
having to take a
series.
percentage.
Oh yeah. No, you're definitely right on that, Devil, because the monster series did get some shit from Dahmer's family and the victims for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. So like with that and stuff like that. But I mean, the one thing I like about it too, and a lot of people don't realize with Ted Bundy, which is in this movie, and people will talk about like how could he, he must have been charming young stupid girls and stuff like that. It's not really all that. It's the it's the kitty cat.
Yeah.
But anyway,
He was
yeah.
chilling right here, and I was like, you know what? Let's just give him an appearance.
But anyway, like the one thing that with Ted Bundy is like, yeah, you must be a lot of like naive, stupid young girls and stuff like that. I'm not saying that some of them were young and dumb and naive and stuff like that. But like I said, the way his charm is. But I love the fact that like even when he's busted and they get him, he's able to talk to these like. To these cops and these things like that about him being like a possible lawyer and knowing all these people that they allowed him to like basically be in a room that was like was on a second story floor where he was basically like talking and then eventually ends up jumping out of it
Yeah,
and
just like minimal
escaping for
security.
yeah, escaping for months, for months and months and months. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously, he's got a good enough charm that he can talk to anybody and get them to believe that he's this smart guy or he knows this person or he knows that. I always love that. And that's like, from a friend of a band that I know that we used to play with there in the Pennsylvania area, Pennsylvania and Ohio area. They used to go as the name, aphasia, but they had to stop being aphasia because there was a European band that came out there. So they changed their name and they became famous. Some of you, guys out there may have heard of them before, but they chose their name from a second story window, and that's why they chose their name from a second story window was because of Ted Bundy. So I threw in that little tidbit of back in my Pennsylvania days. I used to play with both bands. Not play with them, but play shows with my band and their band, but
Yeah.
aphasia and from a second story window until they got a little bit bigger. But yeah, I always thought that was pretty cool because people were like, "How did they get their name?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's a Ted Bundy reference." And he's like, "I don't get it. He jumped from a second story window." But
Mhm.
yeah, I just thought it was interesting, is the fact that like yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, he's just on the phone, no 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 no, well, where the hell's he at now? Like there was like just like, and you would like it's to the point like even in the I mean in this movie they don't really go into much detail, but the Zac Efron one, oh man, they go right into that whole debacle of him jumping out and doing all that. It's just like, how stupid are these freaking police officers? You know
I
what I mean?
know.
That he was being
It
able to do.
really is
I mean,
insane.
I know he was a good smooth talker and he could out talk the talk, but even out talking the talk and talking the talk, man, how are you not having him in handcuffs and or in a room that not only is he in the room by himself, but a room that has a window lock unlocked and all that shit like that. It's like three strikes right there, man. Like one, he's in a room that doesn't have just the window's not locked that you didn't check. Two, you're leaving him in the room by himself to begin with, and three, not even handcuffed or like that. It's like the trifecta of stupidness. And the bad thing about it, and a lot of people don't realize that because of him being caught and him being caught before, how many women would have been saved if that would have those people wouldn't have? Because I mean, he went on and killed a good plenty of women after
Yeah.
he escaped from the
Yeah,
courthouse.
Ted Bundy is a high kill count,
Yeah,
serial
yeah. So I was
killer.
like, it's like, man, if anybody should be suing anybody, it should be suing the freaking police department for letting that guy go. You know what I mean? Or, it's the same thing with stupid shit. When these serial killers are killers, where they're like, oh yeah, he's rehabilitated. He served his 5 years in prison, and then all of a sudden they go out and stuff like that. Even with this, he's gotten busted before, or with the with Gacy getting busted years before and stuff like that, or Dahmer, all these guys you see a lot of them, man. They've gotten picked up before, and either the courts or somehow they get out of these prisons, and you're like, man, if only you would have you know, kept these guys in prison longer or kept them, it would have been a lot of lives saved. But then we wouldn't be talking about these guys nearly as much because they probably, I mean, Ted Bundy, we still would have talked about because even before he got detained, at least I mean, he's been detained a couple times, but with the courthouse detaining, he had a decent kill list before him, but he definitely had a good kill list afterwards that could have been at least annihilated as much. But yeah, then the same way in this movie, man. It's these killers always get busted by stupid shit most of the time, man. It's always like, man, you do this and you do that and you can evade this and you do that, and how you're gonna get busted, you're talking on the phone or something stupid shit and say something you're not supposed to say.
Yeah, dude, it's always that simple stuff. Like, Ted, like Ted Bundy, it was like with him, it was like, a vic. It's very similar with Gacy. A victim escapes and
Yep.
has the ability to there's markers that they can use. And the funny thing is, between both Bundy and Gacy, for example, it was both the car. So Ted Bundy had a victim get away, and he's been driving the same weird pale banana yellow Volkswagen Bug. So they were able to use stuff like that. Very similar to the Gacy situation, where this took a little bit more effort, but the victim got away, remembered Gacy's car, was stalking out the route that he was taken on in Gacy's car till he recognized Gacy's car driving by and followed him to what ultimately was Gacy's house, and that's what got the ball rolling on that situation. But yeah, all
Yeah.
that same stuff. But yeah, when it comes to this movie, again, it's a very, very straightforward movie. When it comes to the ending, it's very simplistic as well, which is the ultimate ending of Ted Bundy. And that's what leads us into the obituaries. I did love the fact that this movie ended with a very traditional ending leading up to his execution, but also showing what they do as far as at least at that time with things like the electric chair, the setting a person up, their last meal, them putting them, in adult diapers, understanding that electrocution, bowels being released and stuff like that. It's just, it was a very interesting thing to actually see put to film in a traditional way where they include that kind of stuff, where how they prep a, death row inmate for execution. And it was kind of interesting to see that. And then the shaving of the head, strapping him in, waiting on the phone call, ultimately pulling the switch. Um, and then again, like I said, I love the fact that they introduced actual Ted Bundy footage, which I thought is what made this movie very strong. And ultimately is, solid for this movie. So I do think it's a good time. I do think it's worth checking out. I think it's very important, Fangs and Infernos, to make sure that you guys are watching the right Ted Bundy movie, because again, there are a lot of them, and it's important to kind of keep in mind what you're looking up and making sure that you're watching the 2002 Ted Bundy movie, so that way that you're not, getting confused and stuff and being like, oh man, they talked about this and they talked about that. So again, just make sure that you're looking for Matthew Bright's movie. So that way you guys know that you're watching the right thing. So ultimately when it comes to the obituaries, here's the situation when it comes to that. Again, this movie's not winning any Oscars. It but when you put it up against other serial killer movies, at least of that generation. And I'll give it like a 20-year swing. You know, if you go from 1990 to 2010, where this movie's right in the middle, I do think it should be considered in a top five, if not a top three, of serial killer movies. Now, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I really do. I think they did a good job. There's enough good things about this movie that make the unbearable things more of a laughing point than something that fucks with my experience. But ultimately, I still got to be realistic. And while I like the movie as an enjoyment factor and a 7.5, I'm going to give it a 6.5 because ultimately, when I look at the demographic of people that are going to watch this movie, their attention spans, what they may or may not understand, but also, again, the execution, whether it be acting. The actor was good. I actually thought the actor that played Ted Bundy was very good at what he did, but not necessarily the proper look, mixed with just questionable choices of facial expressions that I already talked about and things like that, mixed with just very just kind of awkward, what I'm going to call directorial choices, because the director's got to be on top of that. And the idea of a person carrying a body that is clearly a body as people are walking by, and you don't kind of have the wherewithal to maybe adjust it in a way, like I said, where maybe Ted comes out with the body behind them, where it's like, whew, that was a close call. I do feel that there's things that need to be considered when it comes to that movie. And again, I may have been around hundreds of years, but that doesn't but I'm more on top of things from the 80s and forward. So things that happened in the 70s, maybe it was a different time. Maybe people carried bodies and they didn't, and people walking their dogs didn't react as much. Not saying they did, not saying they didn't, but that's just the way it is. But overall, look, I do think this movie, even at a 6.5, should be a movie that doesn't get shunned at a 6.5. I do think it actually deserves some love and some attention and understanding that it's a pretty solid good time, but I still think that 6.5 is what's proper for this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you with on one point and disagree on another point. I think the score is definitely I agree. I think a 6.5 is a solid for this film. Whether or not I would put this as from the 1990s to 2010, whether I would put this on the top five, maybe top 10, because I mean, and
Okay.
that's depending on whether or not we're including serial killer movies that are not really based on real killers or real
Right.
killers
So
because
clarification
because
purposes, I'm
depending on like
specifically referencing real serial killers like
so like something like
Dahmer's, Bundy's, Charles
yeah,
Manson.
yeah. But that's what I'm saying. So something to the extent like even like a Silence of the Lambs, but that's based
Yeah.
off a real killer. But maybe okay, maybe you might put that not that one or or Natural Born Killers, which is
Yeah.
basically a fictional character. But even with real ones from 90 to 2000, I don't know, man. I mean, there's you still got Gacy in there. You
Oh
still
no,
have
Gacy's in my top three.
you have the Henry we're going to be talking about that's really good. You got freaking Monster that we were talking about. You got I think the BTK killer one with
Kane
Kane
Hodder.
Hodder was really 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 good. You got the Gacy one. So there's like there's other there's like I said maybe if you're considering Silence of the Lambs in that because even though Dahmer or not Dahmer his the character Buffalo Bill is not really a
Yeah.
real serial killer, but he's still kind of based on Ted Bundy and a little bit of Ed Gein and stuff like that. So he's based off of real killers. So you can kind of do that. Where like Natural Born Killers, we're gonna throw that one completely out because Mickey and Mallory, even though they probably are one of the greatest serial killers ever, are fictional serial killers. They're not they, and they weren't really even based off of really anybody. I mean, yeah, there has been couples, like a Bonnie and a
Yeah.
Clyde and stuff. There have been couples that have gone out and done some serial killing, but they weren't really based off of any of those ones. So it's like I said,
Right.
so I would definitely say that this one is definitely top 10. I wouldn't go as far as saying top 5 or top 3 because I mean just
Sure.
out of those ones from the top of my head, I'm like, I don't know, those ones were definitely way, way better as far as that. Even even like I said, that's not including the fictional ones, like you said, like Natural Born, or even to me, like I love Sounds of the Lambs, but to me, like Manhunter or something like that, would that one be more about about Lecter and stuff like that? Where, but then again, like I said, Hannibal Lecter isn't a real serial killer. So yeah, I mean, with some of those ones, like I said, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, like you said, there are definitely a lot of bad ones, and there's definitely a lot of ones you're just like, ugh. But then, like I said, I mean, in general, I mean, you got to think like even some of the Charlie Manson ones, you know what I mean? I'm like, to me. I find that which is kind of weird. My favorite Charles Manson movie is probably now I'm trying to remember what the hell, Freaky something or whatever. It's like the
Oh,
claymation one.
yeah. Oh,
Dude, I
oh,
love I can't
live freaky, die
die,
freaky.
yeah, yeah, Live Freaky Die Freaky. I
Dude,
think that
that
one's one of my
cast is
favorite.
so awesome, dude. It's
Yeah.
like Tim Armstrong from Rancid and fucking Travis Barker. And
Yeah, it's such a great movie. It's such a great, like that. But like I said,
I
then
have a copy
obviously
of that movie, Devil. I don't know
obviously
if you do also.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, like Helter Skelter and things
Mhm.
like that, and then obviously like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Quentin Tarantino doing that one, which is, I guess, a little bit more than Natural Born Killers because at least this one's based off a real story. But I love
Yeah,
how he changed the outcome of that. It's not. It's like, hey, that's not really what happened with Charles Manson. It's like,
yeah,
with the the Sharon Tate murders and stuff like that. But yeah,
yeah.
like I said, there's definitely a lot of good films. But so like I said, I definitely agree. I think when it comes to Ted Bundy, this is, like I said, other than the Zac Efron, I think this is the best one version of Ted Bundy. But like I said, I definitely don't think it. I think it's maybe from that 90s to 2010 top 5, but I definitely give it a 6. I think a 6.5 is a good one because it's entertaining, it's fun, it definitely has its things like, okay, why did they do this, why did they do that, or this is kind of stupid, or like I said, but overall it's got that little bit of camp to it, but it's not bad, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's got that good kind of camp that you can watch it. Like I said, to me, I mean, if nobody's ever seen any movie about Ted Bundy, I definitely would tell them to watch the Zac Efron one first, just because it's
Definitely.
such a good, solid Ted Bundy,
Yeah,
movie and stuff about him. But I definitely, like I said, I would definitely throw this one second, put that one in there and like say, hey man, this is a good one too. And if you're into entertaining and shut off your mind for a couple seconds, and let it go.
absolutely. No, 100%. And that's the thing. I'm giving that top 5, potential top 3 on who's watching, specifically on real serial killers. Again, like straight up in my top group is Mark Holton's Gacy and like Monster. Like I think this movie, as far as being based off real serial killers, is very strong. In, like I said, I do believe it's in top 5 personally when it comes to real serial killers. Again, possibly top 3, depending on who's watching, because there's other very strong ones. But again, like you said, Devil, if we're looking at serial killers, the movie's getting knocked down the list at a rapid rate because, again, like you said, Hannibal Lecter, all that kind of stuff, even, and again, for Ted Bundy, we're definitely going to go the Zac Efron one. Be like, watch this one first, watch this one second. 100%. It's just like one of those things where it's like when you look into like those different styles of movies, you know, overall for the serial killer category. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely when it comes to that. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Furrows. We're going to lock in Ted Bundy from 2002, starring again, well, not starring, featuring in a role V&D alumnus Tiffany Shepis. Just
Yeah.
throwing that
Yeah.
out
She
there.
was at, she was at, she was, and we didn't even get to tell you, like, while we're getting ready and you're
I
talking
know
about
she
Tiffany
was
Shepard,
Gabler.
we'll let everybody know that she's the girl who got away, who got Ted Bundy busted. So next time you see Tiffany, tell her, hey, thank you for your service in capturing Ted Bundy.
Yeah, totally for sure. And again, thanks to Infernos, you know that, both myself and Devil are very fond of trauma movies. So when we did meet our beloved Tiffany Shepis, when it came to me getting something signed, it was at a time that Devil and I were actually meeting a lot of people from Tromeo and Juliet. So I was very, very committed to filling up my Tromeo and Juliet DVD. But at the same time, I was not unaware of that because, again, like I said, since I watched the movie, because I had watched the movie with Mrs. Vamp before we even met Tiffany, I knew that she was in the movie. But going back around, that might be kind of a fun secondary signature the next time that we get to see Tiffany, and that'll definitely be a fun one as well for sure. That she's the one that got Ted busted, and we'll definitely have to be like, thank you so much. Absolutely. So 6.5 Bangs and Infernos, that's the way it's going to be for 2002's Ted Bundy. Now we're going to go into the devil's realm when it comes to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Now, when it comes to this movie, it's actually a very, very interesting one. It stars Michael Rooker, who you guys are going to know from Devil and I's beloved Kevin Smith when it comes to Mallrats, but also when it comes to the horror aspect, movie like Slither, that he was, the main slithery
Merle
guy.
from Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. Oh no, of course. And we've got Walking Dead. We've got all that. I just meant like standalone movie.
Yeah, and then everybody's
Oh,
gonna know him, as Mary Poppins from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Thanos. Like all that kind of stuff. There's just so much when it comes to Michael Rooker. I mean, we could have gone all kinds of places when it comes to Michael Rooker, but that's not what this episode is about, man. This is about serial killers. This is about people out for blood. Devil, why did you pick Henry?
Yeah, because there's no chocolate covered pretzels in this one, so
Yes,
we were we
none,
were we were
none
safe.
whatsoever.
We were safe. But yeah, to me, I always thought this movie. I always found this movie very, very interesting because it's just when it comes to serial killers, like I said, it's loosely based off of a couple of real serial killers and stuff like that. Everybody thinks that when you talk about this, that it's about Henry Lee Lucas, and it's not about Henry Lee Lucas. So a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, it's about that." No, it's not about him. I cannot remember for the life of me right this second what the real serial killer's name is. I know the one that Tom Towles was playing was a guy named Otto. The only reason why I remember that is because it's such an odd name that I always remember that. But it's basically like guy, like I said, about these two guys that basically went around and they were just bad dudes. You know what I mean? It was it's just it's crazy. And like I said, I love it because it's got like I said, it's got him. It's got Tom from from who's been in some Rob Zombie stuff and things like that. But it's just like to me, it's one of those ones where it's like you just see the brutalness and the just like the pure violence of this film. It basically captures like the mind of a serial killer like really really well. It's one of those ones that's kind of like kind of reminds me a little bit, just not as campy, I guess, and not as documentary, but like the like what was it, the Leslie Verne one or whatever like that,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the
Leslie Vernon.
yeah, like the like the documentary serial killer about. It's what it kind of reminds me of a little bit of. Like I said, it's got that like almost like I always kind of, it's like got a little bit like a taxi driver kind of feel to it throughout the movie.
Yes.
I kind of feel like it like that. But yeah, it's just I just love it because it's such a dark world where like I said, you see people serial killing, and then all of a sudden that these guys that who've kind of met in jail are hanging out and things like that, and he's got to go get his fix, and he's like, oh, like you never killed anyone before, and he's like, no, never like that, you know what I mean? And he kind of gets this like bloodlust that eventually like he just starts, brutaling it. And like I said, and it comes in a period of time in the 80s when like the camcorder was just kind of coming out. So it shows like the aspect of like a lot of these serial killers that were like basically making their own snuff films and
Yeah.
things like that in it. But I always found that was funny though, because, he's over here, in the movie recording, and he sticks the camera out, and he's out too far, and it bashes on a pole, and goes all over the ground, and he's like, "Oh man, what the hell?" He's like, "Well, he's like, we could have fixed that." "Oh no, there was no fixing that." "Oh, we can go back and get it." He's like, I'm like, why wouldn't you have gone back there and gotten that? Because I would imagine that the videotape was still in there. The thing was on the videotape was probably not the best things. Obviously, like even in the movie, when he's coming home, the guy's passed out and the videotape's on. He's like, "Hurry up, I'm trying to turn it off so that the sister doesn't see and stuff like that." But that's like, I love it because it's just like the craziness, the things that we're doing like that. I mean, yes, a lot of it's very, it's one of those ones where like Ted Bundy, I mean, I guess with both these films, it's very, triggering, as far as
Yeah.
like things. The Ted Bundy one's not as like, I mean, it's definitely going in that realm of like, women who have been abused or been raped and things like that. But it, other than really the one scene in the movie, you really don't get much of it where, the intensity of Ted Bundy, where this one it's like intensity the whole entire time. You know what I mean? People
Yeah.
being, people being tortured, people being, wrapped up, and and all kinds of stuff like that, to the point where even in the movie with Tom's character, where it basically is, where he's almost basically molesting his, incesting his sister and stuff like that, which leads to stuff like that, which I do remember. That's what I liked about this. Now I'm trying to remember who the killer that Michael Rooker was playing that. I can't remember his name, but he actually, the truth of it was he did actually go with Otto's like sister, but in this movie she's a little bit older. I think in the original, when it really happened, the girl was underage. She was like 14 or 13 or something like that. That this guy was, but Michael Rooker's character was, was messing around with. But to me, like, I've always found this movie to be crazy, because even in a realm of like horror movies where things are fake and stuff like that, that a lot of the scenes, like, even Tom said, like a lot of that stuff, like the graphicness of it made him sick, even making the movie and stuff like that, to the point where when he meets his demise, you know what I mean? It's pretty gruesome, That's why I said that's why I always like this movie, because it has a lot, it has, that dialogue and stuff like that that you go through, but it goes quick, it starts getting into it really fast, and
Yeah.
it's just like full on straight, let's dice and slice some people up.
No, for sure. Where like the basis for Henry is Henry Lee Lucas, and like the idea of like they don't pull any punches in this movie, and they, like you said, get right into it. And that's the thing I thought was really, really cool about this movie too, where like the thing is with the Ted Bundy movie, it gets pretty much right into it, as well as it's really kind of making its meat and potatoes about what is commonly known for the Ted Bundy situation. But the thing I also like about the Henry movie is the fact that it is this like drifter moving around, just taking people out as he's going, like with no remorse. There are moments in this movie that I do feel has a little bit of that slow burn aspect to it, but it ultimately is also one of those things where it also has a proper build to the reasonings behind that. And that's the thing I think is really cool about this movie. I think it can be a little bit tricky to somebody who's watching this movie for the first time, because the other thing about this movie too is and this is going to sound really, really weird for a movie that I just gave a 6.5 to, but there are certain aspects of the Ted Bundy movie that have, I just mean visually, the way it was shot has a little bit more polish to it, where the Henry movie keeps this very grainy, dark
It's definitely
style.
grindhouse.
Oh yeah. where it has this grainy grindhouse delivery of the movie. And it's interesting with watching how people react to a movie like that, because I feel like a lot of people that get into horror specifically, that are learning about movies for the first time, if they don't have a little bit of that spit shine to them, sometimes I feel like get chalked up as like a write-off movie, excessively B horror, without realizing that there's a solid and often stellar storyline to what they're telling, and they're shooting it in a way to emphasize that. You know, we have upcoming episodes, like we've had episodes already, and we've got upcoming episodes featuring Rob Zombie, where I also feel like Rob is very good at that as well. When it comes to the idea of like a stylistic, grainy, grindhouse way of shooting a thing to prove a point. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. But anyway, that's one thing I actually really like about Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, where it's like, look, it's shot in this very dark. It reminds me honestly a little bit of Rambo, the very first Rambo, the first Blood movie, because the movie's not shot as an excessively expensive Hollywood movie with crazy lighting and stuff. It's a drifter getting shunned out of town, re- just standing his ground, realizing standing on his beliefs that he deserves this sandwich, and the local person doesn't think he belongs in his bubble, and ultimately that's what leads to the big chase, the big manhunt, the climax, and whatever. But that's the thing I think is really cool about certain movies that are shot a certain way, where the person gets it and understands that, like, yeah, it might not be the prettiest thing ever shot, but it's what is proper for the story that's being told.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it really depends. Like I said, I guess it depends on the era of the Fangs and Infernos, or the people who are watching it are
Yeah,
from. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, newer fans, younger fans who are in their maybe in their teenagers to maybe in their 20s, even like I said, even some that maybe in their 30s are kind of used to these, and like you said, more cleaner
yeah,
films and stuff like that, where like. You have somebody people who are in their 40s and their 50s, going back to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and things like this, where it's like that shot where it's a lot dirtier and grimier. It's hard to see. It's seedier. It looks like you're going down an alleyway that you're not supposed to go into, kind of type feel. And that's what I like about this movie, even though Ted Bundy should kind of have that feel to it. It didn't,
yeah,
because I mean, granted, yes, you got to realize it. Yeah, it was mostly most of his victims. He was out. Going to colleges and doing all this stuff like that. So it's a little bit more brighter city. Kind of not city, but like brighter atmospheres. Where this one is definitely a more dark kind of like. Almost kind of like you're riding passenger with these guys, and you're sort of like seeing the fly, you're like a fly on the wall or something like that, getting to witness these guys. And that's what I always liked about this movie, because it's just like, it's just straight up, brutal. And it's like I said, it's definitely like a film that, like, I wouldn't go as far as saying that people can't make nowadays, because I mean the brutality of that obviously is something like you would see in like a Terrifier film. But then again, not discrediting Terrifier, where this movie was sort of, like I said, sort of Hollywood, but then not completely Hollywood. Obviously, because you had Michael Rooker, you have Tom Towles, you have these actors who are, somewhat established actors, and that's not big, huge Hollywood, but like a movie where, like, if you got like it now and stuff like that, like you wouldn't be able to get it as grimier and darker or stuff like that. So I kind of like that. It has that film of like stuff that like of people that we like to, like I said, the Rob Zombie, the Adam Greens, the Hatchet kind of series, or even like the Soska sisters that we're talking about. It's got that grimier, dirtier, kind of film to it. So that's why I've always liked this movie. It's always been one that, as far as like when I watch a crazy brutal film, I usually go back to this one all the time, just because it's like, it's cool seeing it's cool seeing some of them, obviously Tom Towles has passed away, within the last few years. So with that, but with Michael Rooker, like I said, it's cool seeing him in a role like this, because you're just so used to certain roles that he plays and stuff like that, whether or not. But yeah, but that's the thing about him, is even as brutal and as crazy and as brutal as he is, I love the fact that it does show kind of a human side to him
Yeah.
for a little bit. But then just when you think you're showing the human side of this, you know what I mean, with all the stuff going around, and he goes in and he kills the kills Otto because he's trying to get his sister. And then they're like, what are we gonna do? We're like, yeah, I have a sister that has a ranch that we can go to. And then ending with his suitcase and blood all over it, and then him by himself, which basically means that he took her out too, because he knows. And just like, he's a smart serial killer. He knows if he keeps with her around, she's gonna say something. She's gonna blab. You gotta
He's a
trust
loose
yourself.
end.
Yeah, she's a loose end, and to the point, even when he's going to to Tom's character, and he's like, "No, this is how you do it," and he's like, "This is how you evade the cops, because the cops are stupid. This guy you stab, this guy you shoot, this person you choke, this person you do this. You keep on doing things differently, so they think that it's a different person killing, and not linking it to the same person." And I always love that aspect of this film, where it's like, yeah, he's not typically the brightest bulb, is in this, Michael Rooker's Henry in this movie, but he's smart enough to know the system where he can kill and not get captured. He's not allowing any any weak links. And like, as much as he doesn't want to kill, I mean, because I think he does really care about her and her character, her and stuff like that. He just ultimately, I think, even in the beginning, I don't think he wanted to kill her. But then
Yeah.
as they're driving, he's like, you know what, yeah, this is more than likely going to be a loose end that's going to come back to me. And yeah, if it's my life or her life, I'm taking her life.
Absolutely. And that's what gave us a second movie. But that's a
Yeah.
conversation for another time, because Michael Rooker wasn't even in that movie, but that's okay. But there is a second Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer movie for any of you Fangs and Infernos who are intrigued enough to want to continue out the series. Is it a fun movie? Absolutely. Does it quite hold up to the first? I wouldn't say so, no. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it does give you the opportunity to continue on a little bit of the Henry legacy, should anybody want to continue on and kind of go down that rabbit hole. Again, I do like my series, whether I like movies or not. I do kind of like having follow-ups and stuff like that. So right next to Henry is Henry 2. But again, conversation for another time. But I think it's safe to say that Devil and I will not put this on our list of better sequels when it comes to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Devil, my friend, how do you like the score of this one?
I mean, for me, like I said, I've always really liked this one. It's always been like, when it comes to those more obscure, not really obscure, you know what I mean? Because it's like people who are horror fans and know Henry. It's definitely a one up there that is a big name. When you talk to people about serial killer movies, and you get away from, like I said, you get away from like the big ones, like we've talked about before. Like the natural born killers, or the any of the Silence of the Lambs, to all those, that whole series. When you start talking about, get rid of those ones out of the way. A lot of ones people talk about Henry. I mean, like I said, a lot of it has to do with Michael Rooker kind of blowing up, Tom Towles, being in that, and being in the in the Rob Zombie and the Devil's Rejects and House Thousand Corpses, movies and stuff like that, where and then, like I said, obviously Michael Rooker, being huge, from being in The Walking Dead to, being in, Guardians of the Galaxy. So being Marvel, people will be like, oh man. So I'm sure that, people who maybe hadn't seen that movie before are like, oh man, I really love Michael Rooker. I'm gonna see him in this. Like he's funny. I've seen Mallrats before. I thought he was funny in that. So I'm gonna, I like him in this. Oh, he played a serial killer. Okay, cool. Let me check that out. So I think it definitely has an appeal. I think out of I think that Ted Bundy serial killer or the Ted Bundy story is probably a bigger pull to people. But
Yeah.
I think honestly, if you were to ask people, if you've seen Henry the Portrait Killer or you've seen this Ted Bundy, I think a lot more people would have seen Henry the Portrait of the Serial Killer. You know what I mean? A lot of people, who are into horror films or just into serial killer films, whether based on real serial killers or based off loosely on serial killers or just made up serial killers. There's definitely ones that Henry is definitely on that list of ones. It may not be everybody's top one, and I'm not saying that. There's probably not too many people out there that say, "Oh, what's your favorite, serial killer movie?" And Henry is up there. Yeah, it may be on someone's top five, maybe it may more than likely be on someone's top 10. I could definitely see that, but it's definitely one that's on people's lists and stuff like that. It's definitely one that people will talk about and people have like discussed a lot, whenever you try to do it. And even when you go on, even on Google, you serial killer movies. It's right there on the top of the list and stuff like that is one of the ones. So, it's definitely up there. Like I said, it's definitely like I said, it's not that top tier. So I definitely can't give it the big ones like I would with some of those with some of those eights and nines and stuff like that. But to me, I think slightly, with that 6.5 with what we did for Ted Bundy, I feel like this movie overall it's got that little bit better of like of a film overall. I love the story arc where Ted Bundy's very similar to his story. This one's kind of got a linear where it kind of has got a little bit of a story. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a slow burn to it, but it's not a bad slow burn to it. And it's got a little.
Totally.
It lets you go into the mind of like these people and the mind of a killer. And like I said, and then if you like your nudity, there's definitely a lot of that. Whether or not you're into the nudity you're gonna see is probably not the best because the nudity is very attached to things that are happening on screen that aren't the greatest. Definitely trigger warning things that are
Yeah.
happening indeed to it. So it's not like you're seeing nude girls in the shower or something like that. Ooh la la, these girls are getting nude because they're being forced to and doing bad things. So I think that, with that, but if you're into the bloodlust and the gore and some cool ass effects and shit like that, this movie definitely does it. Where Ted Bundy is not a little bit lesser on that, that bloodlust kind of factor. Definitely Henry the Portrait of a Serial Killer definitely fills that void of that bloodlust, and you want to see some cool graphically disgusting things. It definitely. So to me, I think it's just a little step more. I'll give it a 7.0.
Absolutely, Devil. No, I'm with you on that, man. I think it's great. Absolutely. 7.0 is definitely the way to go. It's a great movie. It's such a cool movie to like you said, to be able to go back over Michael Rooker's career and see things and be like, oh yeah, I remember. Oh, Marvel Universe. What if you hit Marvel Universe level, you're pretty much good to go as long as you don't fuck it up. But then like you look back, you're like, oh, that's right. Walking Dead, fucking huge show, awesome. Ooh, Slither. So he's already kind of done a horror type thing. Great. Going back a few other movies. Oh, bitchin', Mallrats. Love Kevin Smith. Or,
I mean,
not
I
really
mean,
my.
me. It's like me. I'm a huge Young Guns fan. He was in
Oh,
Young
dude, and
Guns.
yeah. Young Guns for people that are like into like, westerns, like outside that, and Lou Diamond Phillips and all that kind of stuff. And then again, just like you said, oh wow, he did this serial killer kind of movie, or you watch it or you see scenes, you're like, wow, this is like a dark kind of aspect kind of thing. So yeah, as far as like the way it would come across to somebody watching it, yeah, I definitely think that it's kind of like a little bit of a like acquired taste when it comes to this movie. Not only just the story of it, as well as the trigger warnings that it has. But again, also, it's not as polished as a lot of people are familiar with nowadays. So people are familiar with it. Just like you said, I totally agree that they're more likely to be familiar with Henry than they are the Ted Bundy movie. But they might be a little bit, if they're a newer audience, they might be a little bit like, not weirded out, but just a little bit more uncertain of a movie that's got that grindhouse look to it as well. So there's definitely things that are just kind of worth keeping in mind. Two Fangs and Infernos that might not quite appeal depending on the certain demographic. But the movie is solid. It's got such a cool story. It definitely keeps you invested. While it does have that slow burn and those lulls, they're not the traditional ones that you and I have discussed at length. So I definitely think 7.0 is definitely a way to go when it comes to this movie. So Fangs and Infernos, our beloved RIPs. That's the way it's going to be when it comes to real serial killers. Devil takes the victory on this one, my friends, as Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, takes out Ted Bundy from 2002. Sorry, Tiffany. We really, really apologize to you, dear, but hey, thank you for looking out for humanity and getting Ted locked up. But that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos, and we really appreciate you guys. And this was a fun one for us to discuss, and we really hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. Keep in mind that if you want to shop till you drop at the Spooky Boutique, our friends at Rock and Horror are that Spooky Boutique. The Vampire and Devil podcast merch is taken care of by our friends Mark and Lizzie. And keep in mind that by shopping with us, you also support them. They have an amazing store of their own, and please check it out. Anytime also that they run discounts for various, deals, different kinds of stuff that they do throughout the year, whether it be Summerween or Goth Till You Drop or around Halloween, Black Friday, blah, 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 their discount codes do apply in our shop. So that's something to keep in mind when you're shopping for Rock and Horror, but also shopping for V&D. It is still a little bit chilly, but we're about to break into a little bit of devilish weather. But still, Brutalities are partners of our show. We love them to death. They've got so much amazing product, so many amazing teas, and a brand new, newly launched one as of the recording of this episode. Working with a band that Devil and I are big fans of as well, as they have a specialty tea involved with the band Coal Chamber. So definitely go out and check that out there, my friends. It is absolutely awesome. And Devil and I are very, very much looking forward to, in our very near future, getting our hands and our claws on some of that Coal Chamber tea as well for us to try. Please support, independent businesses like Twisted Vines. They do everything by hand. Amazing horror decor, jewelry, custom-made Ouija boards. We love Chris and Sarah to death. They're fantastic. And of course, keeping independent museums thriving. Our friend John Kozik, who owns the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, definitely make sure you guys are going out and supporting these incredibly historical type museums and, keeping them there for everybody to be able to go and enjoy. It's incredibly important. And we really appreciate everything that John does. And we appreciate everything that all of our fans and Infernos and all of our partners do as well. And since this is a serial killer episode, we have to make sure that you guys are supporting our buddy Chris over at the Buffalo Bill House. They turned the Buffalo Bill House from Silence of the Lambs into an amazing Airbnb. We've stayed there ourselves, myself and Devil, as well as our loved ones. And it was an amazing experience. Please go and check it out. But that's the way it's going to be. Etched in stone and forever as it shall stand. Devil takes me out when it comes to real serial killers. Henry, the Portrait of a Serial Killer, 7.0. 2002's Ted Bundy, 6.5. We will see you guys soon. We appreciate you, Fangs and Infernos and RIPs. We love you to death. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and T? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the T and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities. All right there, Fangs and Infernos. Let's bring this trilogy to a close, shall we? As you guys know, on previous episodes of the V&D podcast, I've been breaking down Wes Craven's Dracula trilogy. All these guys right here. We've already talked about Dracula 2000. We've talked about Ascension. Now let's bring it home with Legacy. Now, when it comes to this movie, you've got Jason Scott Lee returning as Father Uffizi. You've also got, of course, Jason London as Luke and their respective love interests in Elizabeth for Luke and Julia for Father. And basically, it takes place in Romania, in the Romanian countryside, which has been absolutely ravaged by civil war. It's completely fucked up. It's a big old mess, and it's being overrun and overtaken by vampires led by Dracula himself, who in this movie is actually being played by Rutger Hauer, which I really love because I was always a big fan of Christy Swanson's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and he was the head vampire in that movie. So I love that. When it comes to this movie, thought it did a great job sticking with vampiric lore. Everybody knows that I'm crazy about that kind of stuff, and I get very much on my soapbox ranting and raving about it if it's not done correctly. Overall, I do like it. This movie is the weakest in the trilogy, but I still think it does an overall good job bringing everything in. And the idea of basically, Father Uffizi is trying to hold on his urges that, he's got those vampiric tendencies from the previous movie as he's making his way to ultimately try to take Dracula down. And you've got Julia, who's mortally wounded. You've got Elizabeth, who is turned completely and ultimately has to be killed for her soul to be set free. And, it really has that riff, that love riff and sadness when Luke realizes that this is the way it has to be done. A nice solid fight scene between Father Uffizi and Dracula comes to a head with Father Uffizi coming out on top with a bite and a beheading of Dracula. And overall, I thought it was done very, very well. The one thing I think is also very cool about the end of this movie is it does leave a cliffhanger for a movie you're not likely going to get because it's been so long now. I don't see why they would do it. But Father Uffizi is sitting on the throne with Julia on his in his arms, on his lap, who has been recently turned into a vampire. So it leads us to believe that they are going to take over as the new Dracula king and queen. But overall, I like this movie. I'm going to give it a 5.5 because it is still the weakest, but this trilogy is really solid, and I'd like to see everybody go out and check it out. Horns up, fangs out. Ghouls and fangs. Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah!
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history. He's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore. So all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans that are maybe not as far away going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out. You know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities Shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.